Farming spice solo in the deep desert can feel impossible, especially as a solo player. Most of the spice in Dune Awakening is locked away in the PvP portion of the deep desert. Because of that, I've put together what I think is the ultimate guide to cover everything you need to know about farming spice as a solo player, and how you can farm hundreds of spice melange an hour. Let's get started with the things you'll need before you start farming. If you haven't already done this, make sure you rank up the planetologist class enough to reach level 3 in the compaction efficiency skill. At level 1, you get a 10% bonus, and at level 3, it jumps all the way to 20%. Since we'll be spending a lot of time farming spice sand, gathering 20% more, or gathering the same amount in 20% less time is massive. As for the gear, there's a few things you'll want to make sure you bring. First is a pair of soft step boots. These are easily one of the most useful items you can bring. They reduce the worm aggro by 45%, which means you can compact and gather longer without attracting a worm. It doesn't actually even matter which tier you use. Every version gives the same aggro reduction. If you don't already have a pair, you can farm them in the Imperial Testing Station 197 in Western Vermilius Gap. It's a pretty quick run and they have a pretty high chance of dropping, so you should be able to easily grab yourself a pair. Another unique item you'll want to have is the Compact Compactor Mark V. This compactor has a high gather rate with only a medium worm attraction rate. Compare that to the Industrial Compactor, which has a medium gather rate but a high worm attraction rate. The Mark V pairs really well with the soft step boots. You'll hardly ever attract a worm, and you'll gather more spice sand faster too. You can farm the permit for the Compact Compactor in the Imperial Testing Stations in the aggro of the deep desert. I'll include a link in the description below that shows where they spawn each week. Depending on your server, you might also find them on the player auction. I couldn't find one on mine, but it's definitely worth checking out. And honestly, it's worth the price if you can find them on there. Either way, try to get your hands on one. The speed of compaction and worm reduction is huge. You'll also want to craft and bring some respawn beacons and a good leader John, like a decaleader John. The deep desert is hot, and you'll be out in the sun a lot, which will crank up your heatstroke meter fast. You don't want to have to waste time standing in the shade, so bringing plenty of water is always a good idea. Lastly, it's not a bad idea to bring some spare items like an extra power pack or an extra compactor. You'll be compacting a lot, and during longer runs, it's not crazy to think that you might break one. Having a backup means you won't have to fly all the way back just to repair, which will slow down your farming run. Now that you got your gear sorted, let's talk about where to actually build your base in the deep desert and to get the most out of your farming runs. The best place to set up right now is right before the PvP border, around the middle of row E in the deep desert grid. You want to be just south of the action, close enough to fly in and out quickly, but safe from PvP while you're refining and storing your spice. I like to position myself in the middle of sector E5. This puts you right in the middle of everything and lets you fly either straight out, or northeast, or northwest in the shortest amount of time. Another great trick is to use the replicator. If you've already built your ideal base layout in the deep desert or even Haga Basin, take a snapshot of it using the replicator tool. Then when you head back into the deep desert, you can instantly drop your plans for the whole base down in seconds, exactly how you want it. It saves a ton of time and lets you get started farming again faster. Once you have your base sorted, the next step is choosing the right ornithopter. There are two main methods you can use right now as a solo player. The first and easiest method, especially if you're just starting out, is using a scout ornithopter along with a respawn beacon. Here's how it works. Fly your scout out to a spice field in the deep desert, and before you start compacting, place a respawn beacon at a nearby rock outcrop, somewhere safe from the worm. Then, start farming like normal. Once your thopter is full, fly back to your base, unload everything, and store your thopter again. From there, you can just hit the respawn button. You can then choose to respawn right back at the beacon you placed, cutting out the return trip and letting you jump straight back into the next run. The big advantage here is the time saved. Mark V wings on a scout glides at about 170 kilometers an hour, and at Mark 6 you can push up to 180. That means a one-way trip only takes around 4 or 5 minutes out to the furthest spice field. The scout does have a smaller inventory at just 500 volume, so you'll need to make 2 trips to match what the assault ornithopter can carry in one. When you add everything up, that's about 8 to 10 minutes of travel time for 1,000 volume of spice sand. Loading up all the spice sand at the spice field usually takes about the same amount of time, so altogether you're looking at about 18 to 20 minutes for 2 full runs. Now there are a few trade-offs to this method. Every time you use the respawn trick, your equipped gear normally takes durability damage. To keep things as efficient as possible, I would stick to bringing only the essentials. A compactor, soft step boots, a power pack, and maybe a leader John. You also need to remember that while the beacon saves time, you still do need to fly out and place it for the first run. And if you end up switching spice fields later, you might need to reposition it. That said, it's still a great method for solo players. It just takes a little bit of setup and a bit of planning. The second method is a little more straightforward and becomes an option once you unlock the Assault Ornithopter. Instead of relying on a respawn beacon, you can just fly out to the spice fields, fill up, and fly straight back. The Assault is a bit slower than the Scout. It glides at around 150 kilometers an hour with Mark 5 wings, and up to 160 kilometers an hour with Mark 6 wings. But it does make up for that with double the cargo capacity at 1,000 volume, and way better survivability. A full round trip is usually about 24 kilometers, which takes roughly 9 to 10 minutes. Add in just one longer loading session of around 10 minutes, and you're still looking at about 19 to 20 minutes total per run. That's almost identical to what you'd spend doing 2 scout runs with the respawn trick. In the long run, the assault method is almost just as efficient, but it's a lot simpler. It's also a tank. The assault has more health across its wings, so it can survive hits from PvP encounters that would otherwise destroy a scout. While it's not quite as agile, the thruster module does help you climb fast and escape sticky situations, which is super useful if you're getting attacked and need to escape quickly. At the end of the day, it really comes down to how you like to play and what you have access to. If you're still early on and only have the Scout Ornithopter, the respawn and beacon method is a solid way to farm spice efficiently. Once you unlock the Assault Ornithopter, you can move to a much more straightforward loop if you want. So now that we have our gear sorted and a good base location, let's talk about where to actually find spice. If you didn't know already, there are 3 types of spice fields that spawn across the deep desert. First are the small spice fields, which are basically the same ones you'd see back in Haga Basin. They kick off with a small explosion and a quick purple cloud, but it fades almost immediately. These fields usually only give around 500 spice sand, and honestly they're hardly worth the time it takes to fly over and harvest them. Next are the medium spice fields, which are going to be your bread and butter as a solo player. These start off looking just like the small ones, an explosion, shockwave, and a purple cloud, but with one big difference. The cloud lingers and you'll see a lightning-like effect inside. That lingering cloud is how you know it's a medium field. The bloom lasts a few minutes, but you can start farming right away. The only downside is that it is hard to see when you're farming until the cloud clears. That said, they're incredibly common and usually yield well over 10,000 spice sand. I've probably gotten 95% of my total spice from these fields, and it's not uncommon to be farming one and for another to go off nearby. Finally, there are the mega spice fields. These are the jackpot, massive fields with huge amounts of spice, but they're also rare and usually heavily contested by larger groups. Personally, I tend to avoid them since they're often picked clean or swarmed by PvP groups. But if you happen to spot one and it's safe to farm, definitely go for it. Just know that they are a bit riskier. As for where they all spawn, most of the spice fields tend to be concentrated in the northern half of the deep desert where it's PvP, usually in rows E through I. These zones have the highest frequency of fields, and it's where you'll want to focus your efforts. There are some really useful online tools that can help you plan out your spice runs. They're usually updated quickly after the weekly Coriolis storm and let you see where spice fields are spawning, including small, medium, and mega fields. You can also filter for other important things like testing stations, titanium, and stravidium clusters. I'll leave a link to a couple of them in the description below. I usually start by filtering for the large spice fields to see where they're spawning. Then I check the medium ones after that. The fields tend to spawn in clusters, so finding a zone with several close together is your best bet. You can also plan out a farming route based on where the clusters are, and if you happen to spot a new bloom while you're flying, just detour over and start compacting. Once you find a spice field, the next challenge begins, gathering without attracting the worm. The goal here is simple, avoid triggering worm aggro. If you do, you'll have to fly up and wait for it to reset, wasting time and slowing down your entire run. What's worked best for me is landing in the field, firing off about 10 to 12 shots with my compactor, and then immediately hopping back into my ornithopter to gain some altitude. This little flight helps reset the aggro meter. Then I'll drop back down, scoop up all the spice, and fly back up again to deposit everything into my ornithopter. Once that's done, I'm right back down to compact more. You can also spread your compactor shots out more than you think. It gathers more per shot than it looks like, so spacing them out helps get the max amount per pile. I'll sometimes even alternate between this method and just shooting a few, gathering, flying up, resetting, and repeating. Either way, you'll want to avoid the worm as much as you can, to help keep your runs as fast as possible. Let's talk about the other big threat in the deep desert, PvP. Depending on your server, PvP can be anything from chill to absolute chaos. On my server, it's surprisingly relaxed. I've farmed spice fields right next to other players and not even been bothered. Either way, you will need to stay alert. While you're farming, you should always be scanning the skies. If you see another ornithopter coming in, especially towards your location, you should probably assume they're hostile. The key in these moments is altitude. You want to gain height as fast as possible and be at a higher elevation than them. If you're in a scout, just take off immediately and start flying up. If you're in an assault with a thruster module, that's even better. Hit the thruster and shoot up in the sky. Once you're at altitude, level out and start gliding away at full speed. At this point, you're usually safe since most players won't be able to keep up and fire rockets at the same time. So now that you have your spice sand, the next step is turning it into spice melange by refining it. Spice sand is super heavy, and flying back and forth to the Haga Basin is just not practical. Instead, you should start by bringing the materials to build at least a small refinery right into the deep desert. That way, you can process your spice while you're still out there farming, and haul back only the refined melange, which is much lighter. The small refinery is the easiest one to set up since it doesn't cost any melange to build, but it's also the least efficient. You do need 100 spice sand to make just one melange, and it also chews through water while you're doing it. Still, it is a great starting point, especially if you're just getting going and you don't have the melange to spare. Your first goal though should be to save up at least 68 spice melange or about 6,800 spice sand. That's all the spice melange you need to build a medium refinery in the deep desert, thanks to the 50% crafting cost reduction outside of Haga Basin. This discount is also another big reason why it makes so much more sense to refine out here. And the best part, when the storm rolls in, you can just break down everything and get 100% of your materials back. The medium refinery is where things start to get good. It turns 750 spice sand into 10 melange, which works out to 75 sand per melange instead of 100. It's also more water efficient. Honestly, this is probably the sweet spot for most solo players. It's cheap enough to build, fairly efficient, and gets the job done without too much extra work. Now if you're looking to take things to the next level, consider saving up for the large refinery. It's expensive, normally 100 spice melange in Haga Basin, but in the deep desert it costs 500 instead. Still, it is a big commitment. You'll need another 432 melange on top of the 68 you spent on the medium refinery, which means farming around 40 to 50,000 spice sand in total, but it's definitely worth it. The large refinery blows everything out of the water. It turns 10,000 spice sand into 200 melange, or just 50 sand per melange. That's double the efficiency of the small one. The only catch is you do have to refine in full batches of 10,000 spice sand at a time. Personally, I think it's worth the investment. Spice sand takes a long time to farm, and getting more melange out of every load means fewer trips and less time spent grinding. Whether you stop at medium or push for large depends on how seriously you want to farm, but it's definitely worth it in the long term to push for the large refinery. The final steps before the storm hits is to pack everything up, your gear, your refinery, and all the spice melange you've refined, and fly it back to your main base in Haga Basin. This will probably take a couple trips, so if you have an assault ornithopter, now's the time to use it. If this guide helped you out, drop a like and let me know in the comments below if there's anything you do differently when it comes to farming spice. And if you're looking for more Dune Awakening guides like this, consider subscribing. Until next time, thanks for watching.